Hello, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Concordia University's fourth space. Thank you for joining us for today's event, Mapping Tiohtià. We are streaming to YouTube live from fourth space, but we are located here on unceded Indigenous lands here in Tiohtià, Montreal. And we would like to extend our gratitude to the Kanyen'kehá Nation, who are the custodians of the lands and waters on which we gather today. We respect the continued connections with the past, present, and future of all Indigenous peoples and nations who have and continue to make these lands and waters their homes. Here at Fourth Space, we work with our university community to help mobilize knowledge by co-creating daily activities that examine research questions, projects, things happening across the university. We're running today's event as a live stream Zoom meeting also, and we welcome all comments and questions there via the chat. For those of you here in the space, your comments and questions are also important. Just raise your hand also. We'll bring a microphone over to you so that everyone can hear. Okay, and now it's very much my pleasure to pass the microphone to the Concordia University Research Chair in Onkwehonwené and Studio Arts, Hannah Claus. Hannah, over to you.
Sego Sewagwego, Hannah Claus Yunjats, Jotjage Didaru. So my name is Hannah Claus. I'm a professor here in the Department of Studio Arts, Concordia University Research Chair, Onkwehonwené. Basically, that means Indigenous ways of knowing, Indigenous knowledges. And the purpose of this research chair is really to make Kanyen'kehá voices more present in the university, more known by others, and this is part of the programming that we've set up for this year. I think maybe a nice way to begin this would be perhaps if each person could just introduce themselves briefly. Really, this is what I consider the team, the group that works with the Kanyen'kehá Atlas. This is an online database that was part of a research project, I think even part of your PhD, Rebekah, with Kahentinetha Horn, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, but we've got her mom. And I've participated in these workshops and just found them really exciting and wanted to bring that to the Concordia community so that people could experience it. So I'll let maybe Rebekah, if you could just do a short intro. Each person could just present themselves and then we'll get started with the presentation.
Sego Sewagwego, Rebekah Ingram, Wastrohono. My name is Rebekah Ingram. I am Canadian and American, and I'm not sure what else you want me to add. I'm the project coordinator for the Atlas of Kanyen'kehá space.
It has to go counterclockwise.
Oh, you're right. Don't you have one? You have one?
Oh, gee. Not used to all this technology. Is it on?
Yes. Yeah.
My name is Thohahente. I'm from, my family's from the community of Kanyen'kehá, and I've also been adopted into the traditional longhouse at Aglasasne, and I'm Wolf Clan. I was raised away from our community as a consequence of actions of the Indian agents over many generations. But I had a connection with our family to living relatives at Kanyen'kehá, and as I found my way back, they welcomed us with open arms back into the community and into the family. And it's part of that story Kahentinetha spoke about today. And so I was raised away from my language, away from my culture. So the Atlas is really important to me, and because it captures our story. It casts it in both technical but also into real terms for all of us of where we come from. and our connection to the land, our connection to the culture. And it's one of the restorative processes that we can undergo. And so that's why I'm here today. I am also Rebekah's husband. We met doing research, I guess 2014. Something like that. Anyways, it was a while back.
Sego Zabaguego, Ryan Ransom Jungyat, Donald Akwesasne Jinua, Nidawagano. Hello everyone, my name is Ryan Ransom. I'm from Akwesasne, and I am the Akwesasne liaison for the Atlas. And I saw the potential for this to be used in education because I do work with K through 12 and college level students. So that's what one of my big interests in the Atlas is right now.
I think it stays there.
Sego, I'm Kahentinetha. I'm Bear Clan, and I have children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. So I'm trying to maintain the bloodline of our people because so many of them were done away with by the George Washington proclamation because we're standing in the way. This is in Albany, and we had to be done away with. So many of us ran, and many died. But my ancestors came to Kahnawake. My grandparents, of course, would remember the things that happened at that time, and we heard those stories, so we know about them. So I went to McGill, as I said. I didn't complete the law degree because I couldn't stand what I was learning. This is such BS. So anyway, so I dropped out. Anyway, but I was studying economics, and eventually I got a master's degree at Carleton. And I wrote a thesis about the Handsome Lake Code and the original Kanyen'kehá, which is the Great Peace. So that's been my life, and it will always be my life. I will continue to do that because, you wake up every morning, you think about that, and then you keep on doing it. And we've had so many setbacks in this case that we're on, trying to find our children on the mountain and nearby here. And so now we are continuing. We will never stop. So everybody might as well know that. You can never discourage us from doing what we are supposed to do, which is take care of the children and take care of our mother, the land. And that is what I would like to impart to you today, if we can do that. That's why we're doing this. And we thank you very much for taking the time to listen. Nyawakoa.
Yo. So I think this is part of why I wanted to bring the Kanyen'kehá Atlas here, the Kanyen'kehá Atlas here. I feel it is very important work about making these connections, making present Kanyen'kehá presence and connection to where we are. I wondered if maybe someone could talk about how the project began, perhaps? Rebekah.
It's a very long, convoluted story that I will try to tell very quickly. So during my my master's degree, I was lucky enough to take field methods course, which is essentially the way that I describe it is someone throws you in a room with a language that you have very little knowledge of, and it's your job to figure out how that language works. That was how I came to eventually learn Anishinaabe, which is related to a lot of the languages that are spoken east of here. And I've lived back and forth between here in Canada and also in the United States. And one of the things that I noticed was that there were these ongoing thoughts and understandings about what these different place names that were of indigenous origin meant that did not seem to be accurate. So really good example is Ticonderoga, which is just on the, really it's the split between Lake Champlain and Lake George, and it's a specific point between those two. And what it eventually ended up being obvious as a folk etymology was that it meant the tail of the pup. And because I had been trained in this Algonquian language, Nishnabemowin, basically the story went, well, this is an Abenaki word that means this. And I'd had that exposure enough to say, well, I do comparative linguistics and I don't see any aspect of any of that meaning in the word Ticonderoga, but it also reminded me that I didn't even really know where it came from. I didn't know who it belonged to, and nobody else did either. And it really bothered me because there are so many place names across Turtle Island that have been borrowed from indigenous languages. This just seemed to me like basic respect to have an understanding at least of who they belong to. And that really started me down this path. And originally this was in some sense a corrective measure for my own people to say, we really need to do better about all of this. This isn't fair. And it has a lot to do with dispossession of land. That's a kind of dispossession. But in doing so, and so in starting in this research, it became very obvious to me that there was so much information that's just packed into a place name that tells you about the land. So Kanyen'kehá, and a lot of the Algonquian languages, really most of the languages across what's today known as North America, are extremely descriptive. And so there is this really important landscape knowledge embedded in those names. And of course, because so many of the indigenous languages here are endangered or have become dormant, that also means that that information that's contained within those place names is also going to become lost. And so that started me on the dissertation. And then, great, the dissertation's finished. It's 250 pages of jargon and morphemes and wading through paper to find what one needs. And it didn't seem particularly accessible to me, not just outside of linguistics, but to literally anyone. And so I approached the GCRC, and lucky to have Peter Pulsifer here today, who's the Associate Director of the Geomatics and Cartographic Research Center at Carleton. Said, I have this idea. Can you give me a corner of server space so I can demonstrate it? And that's how it started. And then luckily, Kahentinetha Horn Miller, who was one of my 3 dissertation advisors, recognized that there was something there that could be used in partnership with the people that I was already working with, but also with the different Kanien'kehá communities, to really use this to document that knowledge, but also, and this was a central component of the dissertation, to try and reconnect that language with the landscape and with the culture that occurs on that landscape. And really, we've been doing that since, I think it was 2019. No, it was 2020. And Ryan has been there really from the first workshop that we had in 2020, which was canceled because of COVID. We had to regroup very quickly and do it online, but he was at the first workshop. And we've really just continued from there in these different components.
Right. You've got some images, I think. Do you want to maybe, we could show the images and talk a little bit about what's in them?
Sure. We can figure out where they're projected. Oh, behind me.
Oh, no, it's here, it's here, it's here.
There's
It's
one in
here.
front of me and one behind me. So this is just a screenshot that I took quite literally yesterday of the atlas in its current state. So one of the things you'll see here that's quite important is that you will not see any of the typical lines that you would see on, if you go to Google Maps. This is strictly satellite. And that is because we wanted to be able to show Kanyen'kehá space. When you look at a map, you see the colonial structures that have been imposed on the landscape. And by using a satellite image, it really shows you something entirely different. And what you can actually see here is this outline of Haudenosaunee territory. It's really Kanyen'kehá territory on the east, and then we do have some spots in the west as well. And I think that that's important to try to give oneself a different perspective and really recognize that what we see every day when we look at a map is not actually reality. It is areal. It is a structure that has been imposed. So that is the first, I think, really important point. And then anything that you see in blue, anything that has numbers on it is a cluster of points. And you can see that that Tiohtià and Akwesasne in particular have quite a few points associated with them because that's primarily where we do our work. And then anything in blue has media attached to it, whether it's JPEGs, whether it's PDFs, we have audio, we have video, we have drone footage, and that's just kind of an outline of what it looks like right now, and that's what you would see if you pulled it up in your web browser. This is Kanyen'kehá, or Kanyen'kehá. It means the pot. It's kind of like the washed pot. It's a little hard to translate. And maybe I'll have Kahentinetha check me on that.
Hanging pot.
Hanging pot.
Well, it's in there.
Yeah, so this, I think, is a really good example of why you need to be able to attach media to a point. Because if you just said, oh, it's a washed pot or a hanging pot, or you said, oh, it's a kettle hole that exists in Kanyen'kehá Creek, what does that mean? If you haven't seen that landscape feature, you're not going to necessarily understand what it means. So the scale of this is difficult to interpret. That's the other part of it. So this is drone footage that we took last autumn when we went down to the Mohawk River Valley. This is not a very small hole in the limestone. This is quite literally the size of this entire area up here, if not bigger. And people actually go swimming in it in the springtime after the melt, and it fills up, and it actually swirls around into this hole. That's how the kettle holes are formed. So again, just saying this is what it is isn't going to do much, but it's the visualization of what it's named for that really helps you interpret what the name means. And the platform that we used, the Noodle Atlas platform, which was developed at the GCRC at Carleton, allows you to do that. And that's why we use that particular platform, is that you can attach almost anything to a particular point on the map. As you'll see in some of the later pictures, that includes audio, video. We have interpretations of name. We have traditional knowledge of particular places that we record videos. So there's Ryan. I might have you talk about this one. This was one of our first mapping workshops. And we were trying to work out a name in Kanyen'kehá. And we had bits and pieces of it, and parts of it didn't quite fit. And you decided to call someone to get a second opinion. You video called someone to get a second opinion so that they could actually see the breakdown, the analysis that we were doing. And then as Ryan was talking, who was it that you called? Do you remember?
No.
I remember as you were talking to them, though, I thought, wouldn't it be neat to put this into the atlas, because it shows, this is actually a video. So this is a screen capture from the whole video. And the whole video is us trying to figure out what this name means and the different components of it. And I thought, this is actual live analysis that we're doing right now, and I think that it's valuable to put that into the atlas to show this is the process by which we are understanding this name. So that whole video is in the atlas. You have to look at, I'm trying to remember which point it's associated with, and I can't remember at the moment. And I think we ended up understanding that that meant it's a small island. I unfortunately can't remember which small island it is.
Is it the island of the chickens?
That's Kanyen'kehá. No, that's Kanyen'kehá. No, that was a different one. I put that underneath.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if you have anything you wanted to add about that.
That was a long time ago.
It was one of the first workshops?
Yeah,
think that was-
So
I
that's
think
like
that
what,
was our first workshop.
Yeah.
220,
Yeah,
221?
it was one of the islands in Akwesasne. I just
Yeah.
can't remember which one right
Yeah.
now.
Actually, and so I think either you or one of the kids took this picture too. So I think that's the Raquette River. And this one was really interesting. So one of the things that we ended up doing later on, and Gahande really led this initiative, was to start summer camps using the atlas to really get the kids in the communities to start connecting with the landscape and the language and the place names, and particularly the knowledge in the area. And a lot of people in Akwesasne had a lot of information about this particular river. And one of the kids, one of their family members lived right on the river, so they went over and took pictures, and they flew the drone over the river, and then they came back and talked to the first language speakers and said, well, what do you know about this river? What's it called and why? And that was a component of, and these are some of the pictures that you see here are another component of that summer camp, where they're connecting to the land in multiple ways, where they come back and they do activities. They made fishing nets one year. Last year, they made ash baskets, white ash baskets. And as they do that, they're able to collect this different information. So they'll explore the waterway, they'll take pictures of the different animals they find, they come back, they enter those pictures and where they found them into the atlas. And they've absolutely 100%, they have acquired some Mohawk language just because of that. And we ran the assessments last year that proved that, which is just pretty amazing. In particular, one of the campers, when I gave them the assessment, had learned a word that I had absolutely not taught. We had not taught it at all, and yet they still knew what it was. And it turned out is because the camper had entered that word into the atlas and retained that knowledge. So it's become part of an overall curriculum of the summer camp with all of these land-based activities that really seeks to reconnect them to the land, but also use the language to do that. This was during our, it's over here, yeah. Yep. This one was last year. We went on a really a field trip into the Mohawk River Valley, and these are two pictures from there. So the Mohawk River on the left-hand side at the location of one of the villages. And then on the right-hand side is Onkwehonwené, which is just the really big rock point. It's a place on Lake Champlain, and was used really as a wayfinding point, but from the water. And I think that that's an excellent example of how this changes the way that we think about landscape, because we're so land-based right now. If you go to this point and you think, okay, well, it's a big rock, great. And you can see this thing from miles if you're on the water. And you know that you're going the right way if you see this rock. So its value lies as a navigational marker from a very specific use of the land that we don't necessarily still have. We don't really navigate by waterway in the same way that the Kanyen'kehá did or that our own ancestors did. And it refocuses your understanding of what the land is, from that idea of really having to think about the land in a different way than what you currently use it for. And that shows up again and again and again when we look at the place names, where if you're not thinking of it from the waterway, you're not going to understand it.
Right.
I don't know if those are last ones or not. Oh, maybe Thohahente can talk about this one. This is the letter from Cornwallis about the Thousand Islands.
One of the things that really appeals to my interests and where I see a great fit with the Atlas to our activities to essentially reclaim our space, reclaim our identities, is historical information that confirms the stories that we've been told over time. And one of the things we've understood as people is the entire Thousand Islands and the land north of the St. Lawrence River. It's called the St. Lawrence River along the length now today. And the areas on the south side is all land of our people, of the 5 nations, called 6 today, but at that time it was 5 nations, and there's still discussion about that. That's another story. But this document, Rebekah was doing research, and she sent this to me and said, I think you'll find this interesting. Well, there was an indigenous person who was actually made the, I guess the name in the United States is the director or the person in charge of the interior who had responsibilities for Indians. And he was an Indian. His name was Eli. Yeah, Eli Parker. That's right, Eli Parker. I think he was actually related through some bloodlines to Kana Parker, who was a very famous Southwest Indian from the Comanches. That's right, the Comanches. And he was communicating with Cornwallis, who had responsibilities for the territories in Upper and Lower Canada. And in this letter, it states very clearly from Cornwallis that all that land of the Thousand Islands, plus the land on the north and the land on the south, belongs to the 6 nations. And that's how he referred to it in the letter, the 6 nations. And that's in the Atlas. You know, that was something that's significant because we never made any treaties to give away that land ever. I look at Kahentinetha, never. It's...
Well, there's no way for that. There's no way for that to happen. It
Yeah.
doesn't exist in our way to give away our mother,
That's
to give
right.
away her arm and her leg and whatever. We just don't do that.
And
We live on our mother and we have to take care of her.
That's
That's why we're still here. We've fallen back on our job because we haven't done a very good job to protect her. She continues to be raped and, and so we still have to carry out what we're doing, and we need people like yourself to help us with that. Even though the perpetrators are your own people, but we need to make them aware of what we're supposed to do because we intend to stay here. We will stay here, and I don't know about what's happening now with the politics that's going on. People are being moved here, there, and so on. And but that's not what creation intended. Creation placed us in this area because this is where we have our responsibilities. And so we will carry it out. We will not stop ever. The other thing I wanted to raise about place names, I don't think you know where the word Canada comes from. You're not aware of that, eh? You are? What is it?
Canada means village. So when Jacques Cartier comes, he asks the people, what's the name of your nation? And people respond, Canada. And what they were saying was, we are part of the 110 nations across Turtle Island who are joined into about 25 confederacies. And we are people of the village, which is a universal fractal of this continent.
Oh, well, I have another interpretation of that. I don't know if you'll appreciate it. Actually, it had to do with the agreements that we made with the people that they could come and they could only go into our land just one length of a plowshare, they call it. And they could grow, and we would teach them how to grow food so that they could feed themselves. And but then they got kind of greedy and started taking more land than they should have. And well, we called them Canadian, Canadian, Canadian. And that means squatters. That's the word for that. And so you ask a Mohawk, what does that mean? They'll tell you right away, it means squatters. Just thought you'd like to know that. So every time you look and you see Canada on these everywhere, you know that you're telling on yourself.
Did we go through all the pictures?
Um,
Oh, sorry, the most important one. Oh, geez.
You know the pictures better than I know the pictures, so.
This one I think is probably the most important. Again, it's a still that I took from a drone video that we made at this village, and I'm not going to disclose its location other than to say that it is in the Mohawk Valley, and that is extremely significant. So this was a village that has been excavated, and what was done was, because of the type of wood that was used to make the palisades, and the palisades are the walls that you'll see that go around the perimeter, but then also the same type of wood was created, I think it's cedar to be honest, to create the longhouses. Those posts don't necessarily rot all the way through. So every time that they found evidence of one of those posts, this particular archaeological excavation would mark that location. And this was fairly recently, it was in the 50s. They'd mark it with a metal marker. And the result is that you can see the outline of all of the longhouses and the palisade of this particular village, which again is extremely significant, extremely historical. And so Thohahente and I had been to this village in 2017 or 2018. And 2017. And so last year I received a micro grant and said, well, I'm bringing everyone down. We're going to go and we're going to make sure that all of these important sites are documented for the atlas. And this one we haven't entered in yet because it is a little bit sensitive, and we want to make sure that we have some protections up so that the people that can access it, and if there's information that's deemed sensitive, that it can be protected. So this hasn't been put in the atlas yet, but we all know where it is, we all know what its name is, and we spent 3 hours at the location because there's not one person here on this panel who doesn't have a relative from that. You do too, I'm sure. Who does not have a relative from this village.
Right.
That's the original Kahentinetha.
And I don't think that anyone's ever flown a drone over it before. So we got over there and I put the drone up, and seeing it in front of you was entirely different than seeing it from above.
Yeah.
And I did get not just the shot, but also a really incredible flyover, which in a lot of ways was very moving for me, because they were with me, because the people who belonged to that village were with me, and that we can see it, and we can imagine what it looked like. We know where they got their water from. We know where the fields were. And I think being there and looking at it from these different vantage points and being able to attach that to a specific place and say, this is what it means and why, again, it changes your mind. It changes the way you think. It changes the way that you view the land, and the way that you interact with the land. And this work has always done that for me from the beginning, but then to watch this happen with a young person who was 18 at the time and an older person who's a first language speaker, and to watch that continuous transfer of that knowledge, that was the entire point. This is the entire point of the Atlas. It's not just to document it, but to generate that continued understanding, that knowledge transfer. So me in particular, really looking forward to more work of that nature, which is that, to me, is the original point of creating that atlas.
I think what the work that you're doing is so important, because I took a course a while back, and it was about it was about archaeology. But what I found out was they'd taken everything on Turtle Island, well, just about everything, and they hid the name of the original, what it was originally called, and they replaced it with some name from Europe or one of those, names like Montreal, for example. And I found out that every square inch of Turtle Island, they have done that. They keep the information somewhere, probably Department of Indian Affairs and the Bureau of Indian Affairs, because those are the original names that were attached to every single piece of land on Turtle Island. So now, and then they've intended to change everything over to non-native names, just like our names were changed, and we got these, non-native names. So, punished us for using our native names, punished us for speaking the language. So now they're punishing us because each of those names evokes a certain power from the land itself to us. And then we began to see what it is we're supposed to be doing to help our mother. And so I think the search for the original names, they're trying to now make laws that when you get a deed, the Indian interest won't be on there. So it'll only go as far as where it's whoever has had that land and sold it. But the original interest is not going to be part of that deed. And so this is really wiping us out, isn't it? Take everything from us, everything. That's hard to take. It really is for them to do that to our mother. And our mother responds when we know her name and we call it and we talk to her. She responds, just like we did a ceremony here on the mountain about 2 years ago, looking for those children that are buried there. And 3 people came, and it was a private consolation. It's called the consolation. It's a condolence. It's a condolence for us and for those children. And so we wanted to connect with them spiritually. And so we had that condolence ceremony. And we all brought food, and then we all shared it. And we asked those children to help us find them. We need to find you because you're reaching out to us. We can feel it. We know you are, but we don't know where you are. So give us some clues. And after that, we did start finding them. And we're still finding them. And we probably will have another condolence, very small. And just for them to say that, thank you very much for helping us find you and for leaving these clues for us. And it's amazing because as time goes on and as we keep on working on it, we feel it in our minds, and we're very sensitive to whatever clues are being left for us. We're getting more and more sensitive. So we have to be here. We have to stay here. We have to find those children, at least bring them home and to be with their families. But even that, they changed the names of those children, and they sent them all over where we could never find them again. And it's a, we need some scientific help there to see how we can connect those children with wherever they came from or wherever they were brought from. So we need some scientists to help us with that. So we'd appreciate that. Yes? I can't hear you. I don't have my hearing aid on. Oh.
I was just wondering what you meant when you were talking about finding children in the mountains. Like, perhaps I misunderstood, but
Then you answer. Oh, both.
yeah.
Well, as far as finding the children is concerned, we know they're the ones reaching out to us because we sense that they are here. And we know they were taken from Kahnawake and from Akwesasne and from all over. We know, and they are reaching out to us. We are hearing from them. So now we have to find them. They want to come home. They want to come back to their families and to their wherever they came from, because that's where they're from.
So I think this actually speaks to the strength of oral history that I think those of us that aren't Indigenous kind of continuously question oral histories. I think we always have. We're taught if it's not written down, then it's not true. And this is demonstrably false. Excellent example, the vast majority of the oral histories that have passed down for the Indigenous folks in Australia are now turning out to be absolutely true. So their migration story, for example, having come from Papua New Guinea, they're just now realizing, oh yes, they actually did come over from Papua New Guinea because there used to be a land bridge there. This is 60,000 years ago. So though we get oral history quite a lot in every Indigenous community. And in this case, and it's not just in Kahnawake, it's not just in the other Kanyen'kehá communities. There is oral history that's connected to the children that were sent to residential schools or were sent to hospitals. So a lot of children during tuberculosis outbreaks were sent to hospital. And those children didn't return. We've seen this in Kamloops, kind of the first noticeable instance in mainstream media of the children that everyone knew were there, and then finally locating some evidence of that. And this is true for Montreal. This is absolutely true for multiple places that people don't mention. It's every single community has the same story. And it's been passed down in oral history, and a lot of times, it is recent. It's recent memory. This isn't 100 years ago. This is now. So there is ongoing activity to locate those children in different places, and that includes here in Montreal. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it's important work. that Kahentinetha is doing and continues to do, along with others. I think it's something that is also kind of, I think the Kanyen'kehá Atlas is kind of a larger way, or sort of slightly different way of connecting with that as well. It's really asserting all the Indigenous presence, the Indigenous voices, the Indigenous connections to this territory, to our land. And it's sort of one of many ways that this work is being done, I think.
And one of the things that the Atlas has been used for, that it continues to be used for, is documenting those oral histories. And we can do this in a way where we're not losing the original message, because you don't take a video and then transcribe it. You can do that. And we can have that caption in there. But in a lot of cases, we have, tell me the story about X. So another example is we did a workshop down in the Catskills, and we had some young boys. I guess they weren't boys, they were young men. And they went out and they went ice fishing, and they came back and said, well, we want to put this into the Atlas. And I said, great, go ask Degorundege about ice fishing. We're not going to put it in English. You need to go find that out. I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to facilitate you going to find out. And so they went. I said, this is, how do you say whatever in Kanyen'kehá? We wrote it down, we went over it, so that then they felt comfortable enough to approach him, because he is a first language speaker. And they went to him and they said, Ohonweonwené ice fishing, or Nahoda Asiron ice fishing. And he told them, flat out, in Kanyen'kehá, started straight off. And I had them pick out certain words. It started off with agosarage in the wintertime. And that's what this is for, right? It's not just capturing these different stories, but it's transferring the stories. It's making those stories available to not only the people that are there at that particular time, but anyone who's going to interact with this atlas. And the ability for people to tell these stories is different in this way. And I think that what's important here is that, this is driven by the mapping collective, the Mohawk mapping collective. Kahentinetha and Ryan and Thohahente are all part of this collective. And so what happens with the Atlas is driven by the community and what stories they want to tell.
Yeah, yeah. No.
Was that the one? This wampum is called the Kahentinetha. It's the Kahentinetha, and that is the wampum that indicates, it doesn't give any power, it just is the symbol of the women's role in what we're doing. That the women are connected to the soil, and the progenitors, they were called the progenitors of the soil. And also, we don't own the land. It's the unborn children who own the land. So when they're born, then they become the caretakers, like we are. So we all work to care for the land, and to love the land, and to live with the land, and to realize that that's who we are. When we were asked in court, can you tell us, who you are? We said, well, we're the earth. That's who we are. We can't explain it any more than that. We're part of this, the creation, the spirit of creation. And we know that our language also puts into our minds and develops in our minds and with each other as to what we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to do it, how we're supposed to interact with all of creation. We had to explain that in court. And I think it was a very different explanation, something that they hadn't heard of, was this spiritual connection that we have to our land. It would be like you, wherever you came from, you probably have a spiritual connection there, because you probably didn't leave of your own free will, because the people who run things, the elite, said, oh, this is all our land, so you got to pay us taxes. And then you all got impoverished, and they said, oh, these people are starving, they're dying, plagues are going on all over. This is all I'm talking about Europe. And so they said, well, what are we going to do? We'll have to kill them. And they decided to send you away and brought you over here. And then when you got here, you did what was done to you, was done to us. And that's what's sad about the whole thing. And we got to change that. I think that's our job. But you have to understand who we are and what our job is, what we're here for. And we know what we're here for. And so, and we know the Kanyen'kehá. When we're talking, we're always talking about Kanyen'kehá. That is on the tip of everybody's tongue, the Kanyen'kehá, which is called the Great Peace. And the Great Peace is not just for us. The Great Peace is for the whole world. And we have maintained that philosophy. From the day we're born, we hear it. We know that philosophy. And so we know what our job is, and we can never, until we die, we will work towards bringing the great peace to the whole world. But we're going to need some help. We're having a hard time everywhere. Indigenous people everywhere are being killed off. And I don't know if you know how many of us were killed off. It was about 150 million. And if you want to read a book on it, well, there's lots written on it, but John Mann wrote a book, 1491. You should read that. It'll give you an idea of what happened to us and how few of us there were. And our people sat, talking about the Mohawks, sat in the longhouses, and there was no children. And they said, we have to have children. We've got to find our children, but we also have to have children. And so we did. And we're still having a hard time, but we're still having children. You'll be glad to know. I'm a great-grandmother several times over. So I think that I'm always happy when I hear that I'm going to be a great-grandmother. I probably will be around long enough to be a great-great-grandmother. And my ancestors will be very proud of me. And we communicate with our ancestors through the ceremony when the child is born. And we, at that time, they're still connected with our ancestors as they're coming through the birth canal, and we talk to them, to our ancestors. And we always assure them, say, you sent us this child, and we're going to take care of this child, and we will find the gift that you have given this child to help us with what we're doing. And so we always look for it. And then we give the name in the longhouse. We have a ceremony. And we're having a ceremony tonight, actually, which they're supposed to come to my house and do it. Anyway, the Hadui, I guess you know about that. Anyway, so you see, we're still in touch with who we are. And every day. And you people left where you came from. You have no idea of anything about yourself and what your duties and responsibilities were to your mother where you came from. And so you're walking on our earth here, and it's not being respected or even and misunderstood. And look at what's happening to her right now, all over. And we need to do something about that. It's your people that are doing it. And we are the people that are trying to stop it, trying to make you aware. That's why I'm very glad to go and speak to people, if I can at least help you to get on the road of understanding us.
One of the things that Kanyen'kehá brings up is that connection for the youth and the children. And I just want to maybe give Ryan a chance to talk about, so Ryan is quite connected with a couple of different programs through SUNY Potsdam and Salmon River in New York State, who have a lot of students from Akwesasne in particular. And part of what Ryan's really been helping us with is that connection with the youth, and that connection with the landscape and the language. So Ryan also teaches Kanyen'kehá at Potsdam, right? I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about kind of your experience with trying to integrate all of that stuff that we do together and what you see with the youth in particular.
Just thinking where to start. So yeah, I mentioned earlier I work with K through 12 and college level students. And I find those students who are lacking that connection but want to reconnect with their culture, they tend to gravitate towards things like this, the Atlas, or if there is a lesson that we create that incorporates our knowledge. So there's a phrase that's been coined recently. It's called two-eye seeing. So you basically, when you're looking at a new concept, you're looking at it from an indigenous perspective and also the Western perspective, and you kind of merge them together. And the way I look at it is like I'm trying to take the best from both. So an example, I guess would be maple tapping. So when we tap maple trees, I incorporate our cultural lessons into that, our language, but then I also combine aspects of Western knowledge, such as physics and chemistry, and what's going on when you're boiling the sap. How is that process working? How does the sap flow? So we talk about physics. So that incorporation, like both knowledges, so indigenous and Western, kind of helps them bridge that gap. And then even on the college level, I have students who aren't indigenous who take my course, who they get a whole new perspective on, I guess, the world, especially the young women in my class, because I don't know if you've noticed, but we are a matrilineal society and women have a lot of power. Well, I don't like to say power, but they have a lot of say, and they are strong leaders. And when my female students hear that, they get excited and they're like, wow, like, because they never really thought about that, because obviously in mainstream society, it's very male oriented. So it's like I guess some of them have said it's like a breath of fresh air, seeing that there are cultures out there that, do value women and their opinions and their knowledge. But getting back to the Atlas, yeah, we've had students join our summer camps who, had no previous knowledge of the language or the culture. So this past summer we did basket making, and I think students really took to that. They really enjoyed doing it. And I've had, students say, we want to do more with this, and I'm kind of hoping to grow this as we develop the atlas more and create actual curriculum around the atlas. That's a long-term goal. But yeah, I think that covers it.
That's great. That's I had some questions here, and I haven't sort of said much to ask the questions, but it's because really you've been covering it without having to have the questions asked, which I think is fantastic. I love that this is more of a conversation that's happening than necessarily some kind of a structured thing. So I guess maybe to kind of close it down, was there anything someone wanted to add that they felt didn't get covered?
Yeah, Rebekah and I were talking in the car coming down. Usually she's so busy and I'm busy doing other things. We don't get to talk unless we're captive in the car going someplace. But you raised one of the questions. I think it was one of your questions. And in my mind, I was trying to put it together, and something about body.
It was about how do you connect. She was going to ask you too. How do you connect? Like, how does this connect you to the land, and how do you feel that in your body?
Yeah, and my first thought was, well, I wonder what she means by body. And I don't want to presume. What did you mean with that question by body? Because I think it'll take us someplace interesting.
Well, the question was, how is the land connected to the language? How is it connected to the body? And I feel like Kahentinetha talked about that with that sort of court declaration, we are the land. It's the relationship that connects, and I think that is sort of this essential difference between this idea of mapping in an indigenous way, one of the differences, but a primary difference versus a Western version of mapping.
In my mind, well, we talked about it, and then I think it's important, and this is almost like the atlas for me makes information accessible to Indigenous, or especially our children, Kanien'kehá children, and non-Indigenous people can look at it and reach a new understanding of the world around them. As Rebekah said earlier, our way of thinking was based on how we traveled. And back pre-contact and even after contact, the waterways were our highways. And that's why that big rock was so important, because the travel instruction said, as soon as you hit Lake Champlain, you hang a left until you see the big rock, and you're on your way to Kahentinetha.
Yep.
And to me, that connection is so important. It even goes to the point of, again, a Western reference to the DNA. Dr. Amy Bombay, during the research that was done coming out of the Indian residential schools, Dr. Bombay, she's from Thohahente, did a really significant study that shows that the historical trauma we experience through the residential schools, or like our comparative family separation caused by Indian agents and the Indian Act, and before that, the British Department of Indian Affairs, those traumas become expressed in our DNA. It becomes a part of the physical being of the person. And that puts into a Western context what Kahentinetha was saying earlier about knowing about the children, knowing about the traumas of the past and all those things. And so the atlas itself captures that information in an indigenous way. And it's accessible to Western minds because they can look at our DNA and know that. And Dr. Bombay's research, folks like Kahentinetha, who had to go to one of the day schools, it's in our DNA, all of that history, the bad stuff and the good stuff. So we carried that all with us. So when we talk about the land and knowing the land, knowing our mother, our mother, as Degarundage would say if he was here, we can't sell our mother. And yes, the land was taken and used, but it's still there. It's still there. And we can find our way back to the land as Kanyen'kehá people. And the atlas is one way we can create a doorway for the children and the faces we've not seen to find their way back home. And for me, that is a core significance of what we're doing and why I do this work.
Kanyen'kehá. Kanyen'kehá sa wigwego. Thank you, everybody, and thank you as well. I guess maybe, do you want to see if there's time for questions? Yes?
Okay, wonderful. So if there is any questions in the space, you can raise your hand and we'll get a mic to you. Those of you online, you can also ask a question. If you'd like to type a question into the chat, we will do our best to read that out loud for you. So those of you in the space, let's get started. If you have a question, raise your hand. I see one right here.
Hi, thank you for sharing everything with us today. My question looks into new technologies. I heard a bit of it looking towards the atlas. I was wondering if from all the work you've done yet starting all this project, if you already see an impact of new technology either into transmitting or gathering new data or complementary data, and what are your hopes or wishes for what it can improve into or bring towards the whole project?
Peter is looking directly at me. He wants to know how I'm going to answer this question. Yeah, so I can just talk about a few of those, and then I'm sure there are other people that have things to say. So one of the things that we're looking at right now is the Nunavut Elite platform and discussion about what that looks like in the future and its capabilities and things like that. And I am not going to talk about that at all because it's not my place. I know that's an ongoing conversation. In general, because Nunavut is open source, when things are developed, they're developed really for anyone that's using the platform. And certainly we're using some of those components in our upcoming additions to the atlas. Things like drone footage. Right now, we can get things done. There are additional pieces that we could put into place, and all of that unfortunately depends on whether or not we have the money to do so. So that's a really big part of the technological piece. And there is increasingly, especially with language, discussion about the use of AI. So large language models and things like that. And in general, all of these things, including the technology, the use of the drones and the AI, have nothing to do with me. That I'm more kind of the liaison between what the collective wants and what the communities want and how we implement those in terms of technology. So Thohahente looks like he has something to say. Do you want to talk more about that, or?
Well, sure. A lot of the work that we do that you don't see, and some that you do see on the evening news, there's a separation. There's, for instance, one of the things I'd like to see is for specific areas to be much more precise than we're able to show them on the atlas today. It was originally set up so there was a lot of wiggle room in the relative geometry of where a place was located for the protection of our history and our artifacts, because dealing with Western society, there's such a huge difference between mindsets. We think of the collective and our responsibility to the collective, our responsibility to the land, our responsibility to those children yet to come. Whereas Western societies focus from the day we go to preschool is self and focus on self. And so we run at risk of people who are all about self exploiting further by acts of extractivism to, wow, we could go find some really cool pottery shards or arrowheads at this place. Well, that's what happens. Yeah, exactly. So we don't want to put that on public display because we'll get plundered once more. And that's a reality we have to contend with. So from a technology perspective, one of the things that I hope to see with funding that's come is to create a layer just for community people, so that these important things aren't exposed to the general public. Yes, it can be a vague idea on another layer of it's approximately in this area, but we don't want that publicly known because it'll become another example of exploitation. That's unfortunate, but that's the reality. Another technical development we're looking at is the ability to not just take points on the map, but look at areas, because then we can actually map out over time areas of importance that might have been addressed in a specific agreement where wampum was shared that affects a whole area on the map, not just a point. And this becomes important because we haven't given up the recovery of our lands and the recovery and restoration of our lands to our stewardship. I'll carry that to my grave. And with technology, we can map those things out so there is an understanding that we can pass down to the young people in the communities, that this whole area here, as you saw in that letter from Eli Parker, or from Cornwallis to Eli Parker, all this area here, there was one we talked about yesterday. There's an area that runs from Cornwall, the town of Cornwall today on the St. Lawrence, and it runs all the way north of Highway 417 near the town of St. Isidore. That was all a winter hunting area. It was also the homeland to the St. Lawrence or Laurentian Iroquois. And that should be mapped out. We also shared some of that land as a common hunting area with the Algonquin people. Seasonally, those lines would move back and forth. Well, that's incredibly important knowledge, both to understand our history, but also to understand our reality today when people talk about land claims. That's such a ridiculous word. How can we claim something we never gave up? How can we go and claim our mother like she's at the pawn shop? You know, we need to be able to show that so we can talk about that, and so we can demonstrate our presence on the land continuously for thousands of years. Does that sort of answer that? I guess you get me wrong.
Another question here.
Thank you all so much, Yahweh, for your presentation. I'm a researcher at McGill and trying to learn about the two-row wampum and how the spirit of that can be brought into the research projects I'm trying to develop and working on. I've read some interesting articles, one by written by a knowledge holder from Six Nations Reserve, along with a settler professor at McMaster. One thing that was interesting in there, it talked about how on the Kanyen'kehá or Haudenosaunee side, it was really a question of suspending distrust. And I think what you've talked about today really, that hits home. The level of distrust, the broken trust, and especially if you look at it in terms of the two-row wampum. And then on the settler side, it can be, as I think Rebekah referred to this, sometimes a suspension of disbelief. So what's needed is an openness in the stories, in the worldview, the way of being, the connection to the land that you talked about. So that, you know, for people who don't know, you all know, the wampum, which is from the early 1600s, has two parallel lines, equal in width, so they were equal lines going down the river, the Haudenosaunee canoe, or the Kanyen'kehá. What? Yeah, and then the Dutch in the ship, and everybody stays in their lane. So the question is, how does this? It's an open question of how this affects your work and anything more broadly you want to say about the treaty. Thank you.
We're pulling out the wampum. So I'll just give a real brief background. We don't actually have the two-row, but we can at least show some of the wampum belts. These are all reproductions. They're not the real thing. So yeah, these are from Oswego, Six Nations. They were recreated. And so wampum, for anybody that doesn't know, is this bead here. Is a wampum bead. They're made out of quahog and whelk, I believe. And they're drilled into these beads, which are then strung into these belts. So the two-row wampum is Tiohtià Gaswenta, which is literally it's like a row, two rows And I'll just get up and demonstrate this. So this is actually a physical belt, and it's represented quite a bit now in different ways. So the two rows, originally, so according to Rick Hill, who's Tuscarora from Six Nations, this was the agreement struck between the Dutch and the Kanyen'kehá in general, when they first kind of happened upon each other. And it was originally a trade relationship. And the idea is that one of these purple rows is the Kanyen'kehá, later extended to the Haudenosaunee, and the other row is non-Indigenous people. So originally the Dutch, and this was later extended to the British, and then later extended to all non-Indigenous people. And this is a representation, metaphorically, of the river that is life. And that these two rows, what's really important to notice about these two rows is that they don't meet, they don't cross. And the idea here is we are not to try and steer the other one. So the representation of non-Indigenous people is that we're in the ship, and the representation of Indigenous people is being in the canoe. And that those vessels have their own courses, and neither is to interfere with the course of the other. White represents the truth, friendship, and then the everlasting nature of the agreement. And one of the things that we've come to think of is the idea of this middle row here as being an ethical space. And I think what we're really talking about is bridging, thanks Donna Garachne for that, bridging, yeah. He's also worked on the Atlas, so we're really happy that he's here today. The way that it has always been described to me is you have to get out of the ship. You have to get out of the ship, and you have to, if not get into the canoe, you got to at least approach it. And the only way you're going to do that is to get in the middle. And that's the only way that you can do it without steering the other side. And
they can't cross.
And they can't cross, yeah. So for me, I think the biggest thing has been just shut up and listen. And yeah, I mean, we're all raised, so non-Indigenous people, we've all been raised in a really specific way, and our culture and our language shapes the way that we think. We have to abandon that completely. I mean, you have to forget everything that you know, and you have to examine what you think you know, because it goes deeper than you think. And that means really hard work, hard discussions, really hard realizations, and it's not ever going to end. That is going to be the rest of your life that you have to do that, and that you're going to go, oh, I was thinking about this in a very non-Indigenous way. Actually, we were having a discussion this morning about how the way that I think has changed so much that I can't remember the way that I used to think. And I'm really grateful for that in a lot of ways, because I don't want to think that way. But, you know, we can give the example of, oh, you have to remember that we're traveling on the waterway and not on the land. That's tip of the iceberg. Thohahente remembers when I had my aha moment in which my worldview flipped upside down quite literally. And it has changed everything about the way that I live and about the way that I understand the world. If you're not prepared to do that, don't do it. Just don't. I think that's what if you're not willing to think about the fact that you think about things a certain way because of your culture and the way that you speak and how you were raised and who raised you, if you're not willing to interrogate that, then don't do the work. Because you will end up unintentionally imposing those things on the people that you're working with, and it can be extremely harmful for everyone involved. I think that there are a lot of people that think this is just a very minor way of seeing the world, and it's not a huge deal, and it's just a variation, and it's not. And we have seen the results of that kind of thinking. And we have seen the harm that it has caused. And that is what we're trying to undo. That's a part of what we're trying to deal with. That reproduces what we're trying to change. And it's not easy at all. It's a really difficult and sometimes very painful process. And Kahentinetha earlier talked about non-Indigenous people are in pain too. Non-Indigenous people have trauma from many of the same things that Indigenous people have gone through, and we've reproduced that trauma. And yes, and that is, we all need to be aware of that as researchers, that if you're not prepared to look at things in that way and understand things in that way, then it's very likely that you're going to just reproduce that, whether or not you intend to or not. So the 2-row for me is more, it's more our job than it is non-Indigenous or Indigenous people's jobs. They're still upholding that. They've been upholding that. We're the ones that aren't. But understanding what it means to uphold that means that we need to be listening to what they say, and it's not going to be pretty sometimes. And if we're going to get all caught up in that and caught up in, well, I didn't do that, that was my ancestors, or if we're going to get caught up in, well, that's the way that it is right now, then why are we doing the work? So that's my perspective of it as a non-Indigenous person, and I think in a lot of ways I've become extremely biased because I've been because I married a Kanyen'kehá, and because I've been doing this work for as long as I have, and I do have a tendency to think kind of more on that side of things. But ultimately, the goal from my perspective is what it was originally, which was, wow, we really messed this up in so many ways. I know that my own ancestors have done. My own ancestors dispossessed the Kanyen'kehá. One of my ancestors lived right next door to his ancestor. One of my ancestors got Mohawk land because he fought in the Revolutionary War. We're talking earlier about don't tell anybody, we can't put certain places in the atlas because people are going to go out and dig. My ancestors did that. I have the proof at home. And yes, I have tried to give it back. I've actually, tried to return the things that my grandfather found. And the Delaware don't want it. They said, no, keep it. It's just an arrowhead. It's fine. But yeah, it's me. I have to. And so we had this whole conversation, I think it was last week. Actually, it was with Ryan. It was with you. I was having this conversation with you where we were talking about reconciliation. And Ryan said, what did you say? You said it's the government's responsibility, didn't you? I think we were talking about, we were talking about the summer camp, and we're talking about, like, if there isn't grant money, then what do we do? What happens if we don't have the grant money? And I just said, if we don't have the grant money, then I just don't get paid. And this is my responsibility. It's my responsibility as a non-Indigenous person to just do the work. I would like to get paid for it because I need to feed my family. But if I don't, I still have that responsibility. And Ryan said, no, it's the government. That's what you said. It's the government. Yeah. And I said, you and I both know the government isn't going to do it. You and I both know they're not going to do it. I said, I have to. I have to do it because I don't know that they will, and someone has to. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn. I'm saying you have to. You're going to have to. And Kahentinetha has been telling you that as well. We don't have that choice. That's my opinion. It's been very much shaped by Kanyen'kehá for the past 15 years. But yeah, that's what I need to tell other non-Indigenous people. is, and yeah, it's harsh. I get it. We don't have time for harsh. We don't have time for, we just don't have time. We have to just do it. I don't know if you guys want to add anything?
I just brought some papers that we did here. The Palestinians came out to see us in 2015, before all this happened to them. And they had been studying what happened to us, and they were trying to avoid that. So they came out to Kahentinetha, and we spent the day there, and we talked about it. And they brought Freedom of Information documents, big stack of them, and they told us what was being done at McGill, making weapons and all the things. And after that, we put out this paper. I brought a few. You might try and see if you could get some more to read, because it does cover quite a bit of this. And it's so here, and the funds that were used to build McGill University, it's all in there. And yeah. Yes. And then I just brought something else. I only brought a few of these. And okay, and this one here is, I brought a few of these too. This is a Mohawk Gazette, and that gives you, this is the four men that met in 1710 with the families of Europe that eventually that came over here. That's this one here. Oh, you've seen that, eh?
One of those is one of his ancestors.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yes. So they went over there. We sent them over, and it was the very first conference on peace, world peace, and we put that on. And we took wampum with us. We gave it to the families of Europe. The Tsar of Russia was there. All of those countries in Europe were there. And we gave them each a set of wampum, the Turo and the all of those. And so these were the people that went over there in 1710. And we tried again in 1923, sending over Kahentinetha, and that failed as well. But we tried to do that again by joining the League of Nations. There's a lot of history here that's covered up that you people are not told anything about. But you can find it yourself if you want. Maybe we should take over McGill and we'll put in the curriculum in there. It'd be a lot of fun, you know. I'd love to teach there. Anyway, so I'm leaving a few of these here for you to look at, and you can decide what you want to do with them. If you could make copies and spread them around to the university students at Concordia, UCAM, and McGill, I think it would give them some background as to who's here, whose land this is that they're walking on, and know more of the history. And maybe it might help them a little bit. I don't know. Maybe they'll feel uncomfortable. I don't know. I'd like to know, though. I'd like to know how they feel once they know all this. So thank you so much for coming here. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you also for your questions, comments. Those of you joining us online, we will be closing up the Zoom and the live stream now. There's a lunch happening here in the over in Shift, and then there will be a workshop happening here in the afternoon for those who registered. Just a reminder also that this conversation remains available on our YouTube channel. You should revisit it.